Hey everyone, Jim Branscome here, back for another edition of In the Mouth of Cinemadness. This is a sub-series of the Cinematic Void vlog where I'm going to talk about the movies that kind of the cornerstone building blocks, however you want to refer to it, that basically help build what eventually became Cinematic Void. These are films that I saw growing up. These are films that I saw in adulthood. These are just films that just had an impact on me. And again, if I hadn't seen these films, maybe, just maybe, Cinematic Void wouldn't have happened. For today's film, I'm going to talk about, it's a beloved cult classic. It's, most people like it. And if you meet someone who doesn't like it, they obviously are a psychopath and you shouldn't be friends with them. You should stay away from them. And I'm talking about Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2. Now, before I can get into why Evil Dead 2 had such an impact on me, I need to talk about the third movie in the original Evil Dead trilogy, which is Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness came out in 1993 when I was 13, and I remember seeing trailers for it, having no context of what Evil Dead was, or that it was a film series. I just remember seeing the trailer and like, wow, this looks pretty cool. And even though it was an R-rated movie, my parents, bought me a ticket and dropped me off and just let me go see the movie by myself. And I had a blast. It was a fun action adventure horror movie. Army of Darkness was my first exposure to really Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and the Evil Dead franchise. And I didn't know what Evil Dead was. I was young. I saw Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead 1 at the video store and I could rent them, but I was always terrified of that Evil Dead 2 cover because of that giant skull. And I was like, oh man, that skull thing's scary. You can only go on based on the cover. And granted, that skull thing is not in the movie, but I didn't know any better. I just like, oh man, this is a scary movie. So what helped me finally, kind of learn that Army of Darkness was part of the Evil Dead trilogies, I used to go to a comic book shop in Aberdeen, Maryland called the Comic King. And occasionally I would look around at some of the magazines and stuff, and I had just seen Army of Darkness, and I saw this, and I was like, Evil Dead 3. So I ended up picking up this magazine. This is Cinema Fantastique, which I don't think exists as a magazine anymore, but I just remember getting it, and there's it was more towards other genre sci-fi movies, but there was a lot of stuff on Army of Darkness. But on top of it, there was also articles about the rest of the movie series, and I'll just kind of flip through and show you some of that. Obviously there's some Army of Darkness stuff, but it would talk about, Sam Raimi's original 8mm Evil Dead version that led to him doing Evil Dead. It would talk about, there's a picture of Sam Raimi and I believe that's Coen brothers. That's Ethan Coen, because the Coen brothers worked as editors on the original Evil Dead, and it's just it was kind of learning about these movies without actually seeing them. And it talked about Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead 1, so obviously I became interested in seeing them. However, this was still around when I was finally seeing Night of the Living Dead for the first time. Actually, Night of the Living Dead was maybe a year or so after that. I was still kind of scared of horror movies. I just thought I couldn't handle them. So I just avoided them. But I remember being on a family trip. We were visiting some relatives in North Carolina, and we went to the video store, and I saw Evil Dead 2, and I was like, wow, maybe this is time, because there'll be other people there, I could watch a horror movie and get away with it. And family's like, no horror movie. So I had to pick another movie. I ended up picking Darkman, without realizing that the Sam Raimi, who directed Army of Darkness and the other Evil Dead movies, had also directed Darkman. And I didn't realize that until I saw the credits, and I just realized kind of the correlation of the style and the tone and all that. And I was like, wow, this is really exciting. I was really stoked to figure out this connection. After I saw Darkman, I knew I needed to see Evil Dead 2, and I think October 93, 94, I had my parents let me throw a Halloween party, except I didn't really have friends, so I had to invite a neighbor that was, he's fine, but it was my neighbor and his friends came over to my Halloween party, and it was a bit of a dud of a Halloween party, but I was going to pick a movie to screen. I was like, this is it. I'm going to show Evil Dead 2. It's going to be this scary thing. I'm going to scare the shit out of these people, having not seen the movie. So the party's going, eventually put on Evil Dead 2, and I'm all nervous because I'm getting ready to watch what I think is a scary movie. And then kind of realize, while there is very scary elements in Evil Dead 2, it's a horror comedy. And I loved it. And the people at the party, my neighbor and his friends, loved it too. And it was kind of my first foray indirectly in film programming, where I picked a movie to show to people and kind of said hey, let's watch this, and I'm telling you, it's great, it's great, it's great. And everyone came out and was like, yeah, it's great. I became obsessed with Evil Dead 2, so much so I was trying to figure out how to buy my own copy of it. And at that point, like, there was VHS out there, but like, unless it was like in a mass-produced VHS, like, you know, you try to buy a copy out of a video store, they were like $50 or $100 just to get a tape to replace the tape, because they weren't mass-produced for like general public, they're just for video stores. Unless you could find a used copy where like they had excess copies and they were selling them off, like to get like a new copy of Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2 was hard to come by for a while. So I did the next best, be it illegal thing. I rented Evil Dead 2, I hooked up 2 VCRs, I played Evil Dead in one, had a blank tape in another, and recorded Evil Dead 2, so I had my own copy to watch, so I could watch it over and over again. And as I said in the Night of the Living Dead episode, George Romero Night of the Living Dead was kind of my introduction to like get me interested in filmmaking. As I'm watching Evil Dead 2 and all the flashy camera moves and like, you know, the comic timing and like the special effects and like just like the energy of the movie, just it kind of like fueled that filmmaking bug as well. So Evil Dead 2, like Night of the Living Dead, was a very big inspiration. Like, I want to make movies. I want to make crazy fucking movies like Evil Dead 2. Now, I've already mentioned that with Evil Dead 2, I saw the Evil Dead trilogy out of order. I think it was maybe, I forget what it was a summer vacation to Myrtle Beach or something like that, and ended up renting Evil Dead on beta because the place we were staying at, it was like a, I don't know, timeshare or like a condo or something like that. It had a beta deck. It didn't have a VHS deck, so it was very limited in what we could watch. So one of the choices, and one of the few choices it had, was the first Evil Dead. So I finally saw Evil Dead on beta.
If you're looking at video cassette recorders and you're confused by all your choices, just look at the most important feature of all, the picture. And Sony Betamax records a sharper picture than VHS. That's not just our opinion. In tests throughout the country, more people said the picture was sharper with Sony Betamax than VHS. So why doesn't anyone else talk sharper picture? Because no one else can. Betamax, a sharper picture.
I watched Army Darkness in the theater, Evil Dead 2 on VHS, and then maybe a year or so later watched Evil Dead on beta. And it's kind of interesting to watch like the de-evolution of Evil Dead, because like you basically have to see like Sam Raimi running at his creative peak and like being really seasoned as a director. You get to see Evil Dead 2 where he was coming into his own, and then you get to see the very raw Sam Raimi with Evil Dead, which, you know, not really know much of the background other than the stuff that was in the magazine I had. Like, it was kind of a learning experience, and you got to kind of, watching Evil Dead was kind of like watching Night of the Living Dead, where I could see the nuts and bolts and just being impressive. It's like, wow, obviously they didn't have a lot of money, but they still pulled this off and made this incredible horror film. But out of the trilogy, Evil Dead 2 is always going to be my favorite. It's funny, it's crazy, it's scary, it's like, it's, you know, it's fun. I remember when I was in high school, I would bring it, we had a history teacher named Stanley DeCasadas. He would let us show movies sometimes. I brought in Evil Dead 2, and again, another foray into early film programming, just picking the movies that we'd play in class when we should have been studying or whatever. Evil Dead 2 was a huge hit, to the point I had to dupe him a copy of Evil Dead 2 so he could continue to show it after I graduated high school. So that wraps up this edition of In the Mouth of Cinemadness, talking about Evil Dead 2, a movie that had huge impact on me growing up, and just, again, like Night of the Living Dead, was kind of an eye-opener, just showing me like the potential of, like, you know, cinema, even genre cinema and cult films. It's another gateway drug, and obviously it led to weirder and wilder stuff, but like, it's a movie, I haven't watched it in a few years, but like, I kind of know it by heart, so it's not like I really need to revisit it, but like, anytime I have revisited it, it's like, it still brings me the pure joy and the happiness and just the excitement and the cinemadness of the first time I saw it. So thank you all for watching. Until next time, see you in the void.
Hey, I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul.
Swallow this.